The cameras flashed like lightning, capturing every strained smile and forced expression. Sophie and Adrian stood side by side, maintaining perfect composure as the press surrounded them. To the world, it looked like a civil end to a picture-perfect marriage. Two people parting ways with grace. In truth, it was all a lie. "This is the end of our marriage," Adrian announced calmly, his hand resting briefly at Sophie's back, a gesture so subtle only she could feel the tremor beneath it. "We've decided to separate but remain good friends." Sophie managed a small nod, her face composed though her heart pounded painfully in her chest. The flashes, the whispers, the cameras, everything blurred together. She had practiced this moment for weeks, rehearsed the words until they felt hollow enough to repeat without breaking. The world didn't need to know the truth. The divorce wasn't about heartbreak or betrayal. It was about survival. When the conference ended, Sophie exhaled deeply in the back seat of their car. The tinted windows offered rare privacy, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. She turned to Adrian, her voice trembling just slightly. "Do you think they bought it?" Adrian removed his tie, his expression unreadable. "They have to. It's what they wanted, a clean split between the city's golden couple. We just gave them their spectacle." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "And now we pretend to live separate lives while still married." Adrian's jaw clenched. "You agreed to this, Sophie. It's the only way to keep the investors from pulling out. The company needs stability. A public divorce keeps the gossip under control, but the truth stays between us." The truth. That they weren't truly divorced, only on paper. That they would continue to live under the same roof, attending events together, smiling for cameras, playing the perfect couple the public still wanted to believe in. For the sake of Adrian's empire and Sophie's reputation, the fake marriage would continue behind closed doors. That night, the mansion felt colder than usual. The servants moved carefully, aware of the tension lingering in the air. Sophie stood by the window of her room, gazing at the city skyline that glittered like shards of glass. When they had married, she had believed in love, in the fairy tale of a powerful, charming man who seemed to see her beyond the headlines. But as business pressures and social expectations grew, their marriage became more of an alliance than a partnership. Now it was a performance. A knock broke her thoughts. Adrian entered, his tie undone, his expression softer than before. "I'll make sure the PR team handles everything discreetly," he said. "You don't have to worry about the press." She turned to face him, her voice cool. "I'm not worried about them, Adrian. I'm worried about us. How long can we pretend before it becomes real again, or falls apart completely?" His gaze lingered on her for a moment too long. "Maybe pretending won't be as hard as you think." The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken tension, and something else. Something neither of them wanted to admit. As days turned into weeks, Sophie and Adrian perfected the illusion. Publicly, they acted like cordial exes. Privately, they continued the charade, attending dinners, sharing quiet moments, and maintaining appearances for the sake of the company and their intertwined reputations. But beneath the surface, the walls began to crack. A lingering glance here. A brush of hands there. Unspoken words that lingered too long between them. And as Sophie watched Adrian one evening, sleeves rolled up, exhaustion softening his usual control, she realized something unsettling. Pretending might have started as a necessity, but her heart didn't seem to remember that it was supposed to be fake. A week had passed since the world witnessed their amicable divorce, and yet Sophie still woke up every morning in the same penthouse, across the hall from her supposed ex-husband. To the outside world, they lived separately now. Their PR team had spun a believable narrative. Sophie had moved into a private residence, while Adrian remained in their marital home. In reality, both of them continued to live under the same roof, their schedules carefully orchestrated to avoid suspicion. The irony wasn't lost on Sophie. She had dreamed of freedom once, an escape from the scrutiny of tabloids and the cold, calculated world Adrian inhabited. But this wasn't freedom. This was another kind of imprisonment. Gilded, luxurious, and quiet. That morning, she entered the kitchen to find Adrian already there, dressed in a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the aroma of coffee filling the air. "Morning," he said without looking up from his tablet. Sophie hesitated at the doorway. "You're up early." He smirked faintly. "Old habits. The markets open before sunrise. Besides, He finally glanced at her. "I like to know who's in my kitchen before the staff arrives." She rolled her eyes, trying to sound nonchalant. "You make it sound like I'm an intruder." "You're not," he replied, voice softening just slightly. "You never were." For a brief moment, the air between them shifted, from practiced attachment to something heavier, familiar. Sophie looked away, pretending to inspect the flowers on the counter. Later that afternoon, their divorce made headlines again. A gossip site had posted photos of them at a charity gala. Smiling, laughing, standing close enough to ignite speculation. Sophie scrolled through the article, her pulse quickening. Exes or actors? Sophie and Adrian spotted looking far too cozy for two people who just split. She turned the tablet toward him when he entered her office. "They're already suspicious." Adrian skimmed the screen and shrugged. "Let them talk. The more they speculate, the more it keeps attention on the company's name. Public interest is good for business." Her jaw tightened. "Public interest isn't what I agreed to, Adrian. You said this would calm the press, not make us a circus act." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're right. I'll handle it." She wanted to believe him. But part of her wondered if he even knew how to separate business from emotion anymore, or if he ever truly had. That evening, a sudden rainstorm swept through the city. Sophie stood by the window, watching the lights blur in the downpour when Adrian appeared behind her with a glass of wine. "Peace offering," he said, handing it to her. She accepted it with a small nod, the sound of rain filling the silence between them. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked quietly. "Before all this, before the press, the company, the pretending?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "Every day," he admitted. "But I don't miss who I was back then. I was too focused on appearances to see what really mattered." "And what mattered?" she asked, turning toward him. He met her gaze, his eyes steady. "You." Her breath caught. It was the first time he'd said something real, something unpolished, since the divorce announcement. Sophie turned away, her heart racing. "You shouldn't say things like that. Not when we're supposed to be pretending." Adrian stepped closer, his voice low. "Who says I'm pretending right now?" The words hung between them, charged and fragile. Sophie's instinct told her to retreat, to remember this was all for show. But her heart didn't listen. The wall she'd built since their divorce felt thinner than ever. Later that night, Sophie couldn't sleep. His words echoed in her mind. She knew falling for him again would be dangerous. Foolish even. Theirs was a marriage born of convenience and shaped by obligation. But as she lay awake, she realized the line between fake and real had blurred far sooner than she'd expected. And somewhere in the middle of their carefully crafted lie, love, inconvenient, messy and undeniable, had started to bloom a guy. The charity gala was supposed to be routine, another public appearance to maintain the illusion of civility between two exes. For Sophie and Adrian, it had become part of the act. Smile for the cameras, exchange polite remarks, and look convincingly unbothered by their so-called divorce. But tonight felt different. Sophie stood before the mirror, adjusting the silver clasp of her gown. The deep sapphire fabric hugged her figure perfectly, elegant yet understated. She told herself it didn't matter what Adrian thought, and yet, when she stepped out of the room and saw the way his eyes lingered, her heart betrayed her resolve. "You look..." Adrian hesitated, clearing his throat. "Stunning." She arched a brow. "Careful. Someone might think you still care." He smirked faintly. "Maybe I do." Before she could reply, the car arrived, and the moment passed, tucked neatly into the silence that followed them all the way to the gala. The event was held at the Grand Regency Hotel, filled with the city's elite. The buzz of conversation, clinking glasses, and camera flashes filled the ballroom as Sophie and Adrian entered arm in arm, every eye turning toward them. Adrian Blackwood and Sophie Grant, the most civilized exes in high society, a journalist murmured nearby, her voice carrying just enough to be heard. Sophie forced a smile, gripping Adrian's arm a little tighter. "We should win an award for our acting," she whispered. He leaned close enough that his breath brushed her ear. "Who says we're acting?" Her pulse quickened, but before she could respond, another voice interrupted. "Adrian! Sophie!" They turned to see Clara Valmont, a young socialite and one of Adrian's rumored past flings, gliding toward them in a glittering red dress. Her smile was perfectly poised, sharp, confident, and just a bit possessive. "Adrian, I didn't expect to see you here," Clara said sweetly, resting her hand on his arm as though Sophie didn't exist. Sophie's stomach twisted, though she managed to keep her expression neutral. Adrian stepped back politely. "Clara, it's a charity event, not a private club." Clara's eyes flicked to Sophie, her smile tightening. "Of course. And Sophie, you look radiant. Divorce seems to suit you." Sophie's lips curved into a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you, Clara. You'd know all about appearances." Adrian hid a small smirk as Clara's expression faltered for a heartbeat. The exchange was brief but electric, a reminder that Sophie, despite her calm exterior, wasn't one to be underestimated. As the evening went on, Adrian and Sophie maintained their facade. But Sophie noticed how Clara hovered nearby, laughing too loudly at Adrian's jokes, finding excuses to draw his attention. The rational part of Sophie told herself it was meaningless, that this was just part of the game, the illusion they'd agreed to maintain. But the quiet ache in her chest said otherwise. When she stepped outside for a breath of air, the cool night wind carried her thoughts with it. A few moments later, Adrian joined her. "You disappeared," he said softly. "I needed some air," she replied. "Too many people pretending to care." He studied her face, his voice low. "You mean Clara?" Her lips tightened. "She's irrelevant." Adrian smiled faintly. "You always say things you don't mean when you're jealous." Her head snapped up, eyes flashing. "Jealous? You think I—" He stepped closer, cutting her off gently. "I know you," he said quietly. "Better than anyone. You don't have to pretend with me." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The tension between them was palpable, charged with something far more real than either wanted to admit. Finally, Sophie exhaled. "Maybe I am jealous," she confessed softly. "But that doesn't mean this, whatever we're doing, makes sense." Adrian's expression softened. "Maybe it doesn't have to make sense. Maybe it just has to be honest." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the lines between truth and pretense disappeared completely. He reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, and the simple touch made her heart stumble. That night, as they returned home in silence, Sophie found herself unable to stop replaying that moment. The closeness, the warmth in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice. She told herself it was still an act, that this fragile, dangerous connection between them was just another layer of their elaborate charade. But deep down, Sophie knew the truth. The lie was the divorce. What was real was the way he still looked at her. When Adrian's assistant informed Sophie that the company's next investor retreat would be held at a luxury seaside resort, she hadn't expected to be invited, much less required to attend. "Adrian insists you come," the assistant had said briskly over the phone. "The investors still see you as part of the brand image. Your presence calms them." Calms them. The irony wasn't lost on Sophie. She was the ex-wife who supposedly divorced the CEO and still somehow represented stability. Still, she packed her bags, reminding herself this was just another act in the ongoing play of their fake divorce. Nothing more. When she arrived at the private airstrip, Adrian was already waiting beside the jet, dressed in a linen shirt and slacks, sunglasses hiding his eyes. "You didn't have to come in person," she said, her tone cool. He smiled slightly. "If we're going to spend a week pretending to be civil exes, or whatever the public thinks we are, I figured we should at least start together." Sophie crossed her arms, but couldn't hide the faint curve of her lips. "Pretending is something we've gotten good at." "Maybe too good," he murmured, holding her gaze a second too long. The resort was breathtaking. Azure waters, white sand, and the scent of jasmine carried by the ocean breeze. Their villa overlooked the sea, its open design leaving little room for privacy. Sophie blinked in disbelief when the concierge announced, "One suite, of course." "As always." She turned to Adrian sharply. "One suite." He lifted a brow, unfazed. "Separate rooms raise questions. You know how the media is. Our last-minute divorce already has them sniffing for scandal." She exhaled, trying to stay composed. "Fine. But I'm taking the main bedroom." He chuckled, handing her the keycard. "As you wish." The first evening passed with stiff smiles and practiced charm. Investors mingled by the pool, discussing mergers and expansions while Sophie floated through conversations with effortless poise. Adrian watched her from across the terrace, noting the way she handled the crowd. Elegant, intelligent, and untouchable. Later, when the party dwindled, they found themselves on the balcony overlooking the moonlit sea. "You were incredible tonight," Adrian said quietly. "They're more confident about the deal because of you." Sophie turned toward him, her eyes reflecting the silver glow of the night. "I didn't do it for them. I did it so we can both get through this without another headline." "Still," he said softly, "thank you." The gratitude in his voice caught her off guard. She'd expected sarcasm, not sincerity. The following morning, the line between pretense and reality began to blur even more. They attended meetings together, shared quiet breakfasts, and laughed, genuinely, at small things neither remembered missing. At one point, a photographer from a business magazine asked for a few candid shots of the power couple. Adrian's arm slipped naturally around her waist. Sophie leaned in, smiling up at him, and for a fleeting instant, it didn't feel like acting. It felt familiar. Right. When the photographer walked away, Adrian didn't immediately let go. His hand lingered, fingers brushing lightly against her side. "You're doing that thing again," she murmured. "What thing?" "Looking at me like you forgot we're divorced." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I did." Her breath caught. She stepped back, needing distance, but the truth followed her like a shadow. That night, a sudden summer storm rolled in, trapping them indoors. Power flickered, and thunder rumbled across the horizon. Sophie sat near the window, watching the rain batter the glass while Adrian poured them both a drink. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "what it would have been like if we hadn't done this, if we'd just stayed married for real?" Adrian handed her the glass, his expression unreadable. "Every day." Her chest tightened. "Then why didn't you fight for us?" "I thought I was protecting you," he said, his voice low, almost pained. "The press, the investors, the pressure. It was too much. You deserved peace, not a war with my world." "And yet," she whispered, looking at him, "here we are. Still pretending. Still together." The thunder rolled again, closer this time. Neither of them moved. Then Adrian reached for her hand. "Sophie, maybe we're not pretending anymore." The words were quiet, sincere, and frighteningly real. Sophie's pulse raced, but she didn't pull away. She wanted to, should have, but the warmth of his touch and the emotion in his voice made it impossible. Outside, the rain poured harder, but inside, something fragile and undeniable began to take shape again. A rekindled spark that neither the cameras nor the lies could contain. By the time Sophie and Adrian returned from the investor retreat, the internet was already ablaze with photos of them together. The glossy shots from the seaside resort looked anything but staged. Adrian's hand resting gently on Sophie's back, her head tilted toward him as they laughed under string lights, a tender moment caught at sunset when their faces were inches apart. Every tabloid, gossip blog, and business magazine had the same question. Are Adrian Blackwood and Sophie Grant really divorced? Sophie sat in her office, scrolling through headline after headline, her stomach twisting with every photo. Power couple or perfect pretenders? Adrian and Sophie. The love that won't die? The fake divorce scandal that fooled the city. She dropped the tablet on her desk and pressed her fingers to her temples. Just as she was about to call her PR manager, the door opened. Adrian walked in, his expression unreadable, holding a newspaper folded neatly under his arm. "You've seen them," he said simply. She looked up sharply. "Of course I have. It's everywhere, Adrian. You said this divorce would calm things down, not make us front-page entertainment." He set the paper on her desk and leaned against the edge. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Those photos, they weren't staged." "That's exactly the problem," she said, exasperated. "They look real because—" She stopped herself before the words slipped out. Adrian's gaze locked on hers. "Because they were?" The silence between them was charged, thick with everything they weren't saying. Sophie turned away, trying to steady her breath. "You don't get it," she said finally. "People are going to think we faked our divorce for publicity. That this whole thing was a stunt." He stepped closer. "Let them think whatever they want. We don't owe anyone the truth." Her eyes flicked up to meet his. "And what is the truth, Adrian?" He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, His voice was low, steady. "That I never stopped loving you." The words hit her like a wave. Sudden, disarming, and impossible to ignore. Sophie froze, her mind scrambling for something, anything to say. "You don't get to say that," she whispered. "Not after everything." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I know I messed up. I let other people, other priorities, come between us. I thought pushing you away would protect you. But every day since you left, I've realized how wrong I was." Sophie's heart ached, but she fought to keep her composure. "You think saying that fixes everything? You think love just survives after betrayal and distance and pretending?" Adrian moved closer until she could feel the quiet heat radiating off him. "Maybe it does. Maybe it's the only thing that survived." She turned away again, but not fast enough to hide the tear that slipped down her cheek. That night, Sophie sat alone in her apartment, staring out at the city lights. She wanted to hate him for making her feel everything she'd tried so hard to bury. But she couldn't. Because underneath the anger, the doubt, the confusion, there was still love. The kind that never really left, no matter how many times she tried to let it go. Her phone buzzed. A new message from Adrian. "Dinner tomorrow. Just us. No cameras. I need to talk." She stared at it for a long time. Her instincts screamed to delete it. To protect herself. To stay free of the web she'd only just escaped. But her heart, foolish, stubborn, hopeful, made her type back one word. "Okay." The next evening, she met him at a quiet restaurant by the harbor, one of the few places in the city where people still respected privacy. The moment she walked in, she saw him waiting at a corner table, his eyes softening when they met hers. "You came," he said quietly. "I said I would." Dinner was quiet at first, filled with hesitant smiles and cautious conversation. But as the evening went on, the air between them began to soften. The way he listened to her, the way she laughed. It felt almost like old times. When dessert arrived, Adrian finally leaned forward, his voice low. "You once told me you wanted a life built on truth. Not image. Not convenience. I couldn't give you that then. But I can now." Sophie's breath caught. "And what if it's too late?" He smiled faintly. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life proving it isn't." She wanted to argue, to remind him of everything they'd lost. But when he reached across the table and took her hand, the familiar warmth of his touch melted her resistance. For the first time since their divorce, Sophie didn't feel like she was pretending. Outside, the harbor lights shimmered across the water, and for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to believe in second chances. But as they left the restaurant, a camera flash burst from the shadows, bright, unrelenting, and all too familiar. The next day's headlines would make sure of it. Adrian and Sophie. Secret dinner date. Reconciliation or PR spin. And Sophie realized their rekindled connection wasn't just fragile. It was about to be tested harder than ever. The next morning, Sophie's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her publicist, the PR team, a dozen reporters, all clamoring for a statement. "Is it true you're back together? Was the divorce faked from the start? Are you manipulating the media for attention?" Every question felt like a dagger, twisting in a wound she didn't even know was still open. She silenced her phone and leaned back against the kitchen counter, exhaustion pressing down on her chest. Across the penthouse, the morning sun filtered through the tall windows, painting the marble flooring gold, a sharp contrast to the storm brewing inside her. The door opened, and Adrian walked in, still in the suit he'd worn for an early meeting. His expression was grim. "You've seen the headlines." She laughed bitterly. "Hard to miss when they're calling us liars on every platform." Adrian set his briefcase down. "I'm handling it." Sophie's temper flared. "Handling it? Adrian, we're past damage control. They think our marriage was a publicity stunt. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" He stepped closer, voice calm but firm. "Then tell me what you want me to do." "I want you to tell the truth," she snapped. "That we divorced to get out of the pressure, that we were supposed to end this act, not turn it into another media performance." He hesitated. "The board." "Don't," she cut him off, her voice shaking. "Don't you dare say this is about the company. Not again." Adrian's jaw clenched. "Sophie, this merger is critical. If the board believes I've lost credibility, The entire deal could collapse. Hundreds of people could lose their jobs. She stared at him, disbelief flooding her face. So that's it. Business first. Again. This isn't about me, he said, his voice low. It's about what we've built. No, she whispered, tears burning behind her eyes. I built a life outside of you, Adrian. You're the one still trapped in the illusion. Silence filled the room. He took a step closer, but she moved back. Don't, she said, her voice breaking. You can't keep saying you love me and then treat me like I'm just part of your strategy. His shoulders slumped, and for a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then quietly he said, There's something you don't know. Sophie froze. What are you talking about? He exhaled deeply, like the words themselves hurt to say. The divorce. It wasn't finalized. She blinked, uncomprehending. What? The papers were filed, he continued, but I never signed the final decree. Our lawyers assumed I did, and I let them. On paper, we're still married. Sophie's pulse roared in her ears. You what? I thought I was buying time, he said quickly. Time to fix things between us before it was really over. I didn't want to trap you, Sophie. I just couldn't let go. Her breath came out in short, shaky bursts. You lied to me. All this time. I wanted to tell you, he said, his voice breaking. But every time I tried, something got in the way. The company, the press. She shook her head, fury and heartbreak colliding inside her. You don't get to use excuses anymore. You made me think we were free, that I was free. You took that from me. He reached for her, desperate. Please. I didn't mean. Don't touch me, she snapped, backing away. You don't get to mean well anymore, Adrian. You lied about the one thing that mattered. The truth. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. I thought I was finally done pretending. But it turns out, the biggest lie of all, was the divorce itself. She left before he could answer. Outside, the autumn wind cut through her like glass. Paparazzi called her name from across the street, but their questions blurred into noise as she slipped into her car and shut the door. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away from him, from the headlines, from the fake world she'd been trapped in for too long. For the first time since the beginning of their marriage, Sophie didn't know what was real anymore. Back in the penthouse, Adrian sat alone in the silence she'd left behind. He looked at the unsigned divorce papers still locked in his desk drawer. The signature line stared back at him like a ghost. He'd thought keeping them unsent would give him a second chance, a way to fix what he'd broken. But now, he realized the truth. He hadn't saved their love. He'd destroyed her trust. That night, Sophie sat by the ocean, staring at the dark waves. Her phone buzzed again, Adrian's name flashing across the screen. For a long moment, she considered answering. But then with trembling fingers, she turned it off. Because sometimes, love wasn't enough. Sometimes the truth came too late. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence. Sophie hadn't answered a single call, text, or email. Her PR manager begged her to release a statement. The media frenzy was spinning out of control. But she couldn't bring herself to care about the headlines anymore. What hurt most wasn't the gossip, or the cameras, or the half-truths whispered through the city's elite. It was him. It was always him. Adrian's lie had cut deeper than any betrayal before. He hadn't just broken her trust. He'd rewritten her freedom without asking. Now, as she sat in her quiet coastal apartment, staring out at the gray sky over the sea, she wondered if maybe love wasn't supposed to survive lies this big. On the 4th day, a knock echoed through her door. Once. Twice. Then silence. Sophie hesitated, heart pounding. She didn't need to look. She knew it was him. Go away, Adrian, she called, voice steady but thin. His voice came through, muffled but calm. Please, Sophie. Just 5 minutes. Then I'll leave. She exhaled, running a trembling hand through her hair. She could have ignored him. She should have. But curiosity, and the smallest flicker of unfinished emotion, made her pull the door open. Adrian stood there, looking tired. His normally impeccable suit was wrinkled, his eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. He held a folder in one hand. 5 minutes, she said coldly. He nodded, stepping inside but keeping a respectful distance. "Thank you." For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of the ocean through the window filled the silence between them. Finally, Sophie crossed her arms. "You have something to say?" "Yes." He took a slow breath. "I owe you the truth, all of it." She said nothing, only watching him carefully. "When I told you I didn't sign the divorce papers," he began, "it wasn't because I was trying to control you. It was because of an agreement my father made before he died. The company trust was tied to our marriage. If our divorce became final before the merger, everything my father built would have fallen into the hands of the board. Men who would have sold it off in pieces." Sophie frowned. "You mean, all of this was about money?" "No," he said quickly. "Not money. Legacy. People's jobs. My father's life's work. I thought if I delayed the finalization for a few months, we could finish the merger quietly and then I'd finally let you go properly." She let out a bitter laugh. "So, you lied to protect the company. Again. Just like you did when we were married." Adrian flinched. "It wasn't just the company." His voice dropped, softer now. "I wasn't ready to lose you." Sophie's throat tightened, but she refused to let the emotion show. "You already had," she whispered. "I know," he said. "But the thought of it becoming real, permanent, I couldn't do it. Every time I looked at those papers, I saw the last thing connecting us disappear." He placed the folder gently on the table between them. "This is the finalized document. Signed. Dated. I told the lawyers to file it today." Her eyes flicked down to it, the neat black ink glaring against the white paper like an ending she hadn't asked for but always expected. "So that's it," she murmured. "Now you're really letting me go." Adrian nodded, his voice barely audible. "If that's what you want." Sophie looked at him, really looked. The man who once stood untouchable in boardrooms now looked utterly human. The same man who'd built walls of steel around his heart now stood before her, broken, unguarded, and honest. Part of her wanted to scream. Part of her wanted to run to him. Instead, she whispered, "Why tell me now?" He met her eyes, steady and raw. "Because I finally understand that love without truth isn't love at all. I kept thinking I could protect you by keeping you in the dark. But all I did was push you further away." He stepped closer, slowly, as though afraid she'd vanish if he moved too quickly. "I don't want to trap you anymore, Sophie. I just wanted you to know the truth before I let you go." The sincerity in his voice hit her harder than anger ever could. She looked down at the papers again, at the end of a marriage that had once felt like a beginning. Then back up at him, eyes glistening. "Do you know what hurts the most?" she said quietly. "It's not the lie. It's that I would have helped you if you'd just asked. I would have stayed for the merger, for the company, for you, if you'd been honest with me." A single tear slipped down her cheek. Adrian closed the distance between them, his hand hesitating in the air before gently brushing it away. "I know. And that's why I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn that kind of trust back. Even if you never give it to me." Sophie's breath trembled. "And if I can't?" He smiled sadly. "Then I'll still be grateful that once you did." They stood there for a long moment, the sound of the waves filling the space between everything said and unsaid. Then Sophie took the folder, holding it to her chest. "Goodbye, Adrian." He nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Goodbye, Sophie." He turned and walked to the door, pausing only once, as if to memorize her one last time, before stepping out into the fading light. When the door closed behind him, Sophie let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. It was over. Truly over. And yet, as she stared out at the sea, she couldn't help but wonder if love like theirs ever really ended, or if it simply lived quietly in the spaces between forgiveness and regret. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more original novel stories. And stay tuned, our next story is coming soon.